Hey guys, I'm McGann, and welcome to the Fangirl, where we are doing another Harry Potter book versus movie, this time for the Prisoner of Azkaban. For those of you who somehow still don't know, I have been going over the Harry Potter series chapter by chapter over on the Fanily. There's been a little bit of discussion at this point as to whether or not I might bring that series back to the Fangirl, but so far, as of recording this in May of 2021, I have not. But if it's something you feel really strongly about one way or the other, leave me a comment, because I do read and listen to a lot of those comments, and I try to avoid as much controversy as I can. But as usual, whenever I do a book versus movie, I'm going to assume that you have read the book and seen the movie so that any spoilers you get are completely on yourself. And I don't cover every little nitty-gritty difference that doesn't match up between the book and the movie, because I'd really like you to read and watch these things for yourself, and if I tell you everything, there's really no incentive for you to do that. Plus, it doesn't give anybody anything to talk about in the comments, and if I really did wanted to go over every little tiny issue, I mean, come on, this video would be 20 hours long and nobody wants to edit that. But anyways, to move right along and jump into my notes here. So the movie opens up with Vernon checking on Harry, and Harry's pretending to be asleep, but then as soon as Vernon leaves, he's trying to practice spells sort of under the blankets there, and it's a much sexier opening, and I mean that as in a movie kind of term, not as in Harry as a person. It's a much more interesting, intriguing, dramatic sort of opening compared to the book, where Harry is using a quill and writing his essays and just being, oh, so when will anybody write me? When can I go back to Hogwarts? I think the movie kind of captures that same essence in a much more wham bam, let's jump right into this kind of way. And then in the movie, Aunt Marge shows up and Harry asks about permission slips with absolutely no context on what the permission slip is really needed for. And the Dursleys are just really indifferent to Harry. They could care less if he's there or not. In the book, they're sort of trying to pretend that he doesn't exist, and Harry is asking about a permission slip, and Vernon's like, oh, well, we'll see about that. Let's see if you behave, and then I might sign it. But in the movie, it's kind of like the Dursleys don't care about him at this point, but they also don't really treat him like family either. So he's in this sort of weird gray area where they don't seem to be torturing Harry, at least not at this point, but they also want to live their life as if Harry's not there when he's right there. And in the movie, which most of these notes are going to be based off of what I immediately saw in the movie, it took very little to set Harry off. I mean, he really seems like a teenager who has hit the peak of teenagedom, and he's just hormonal and furious to be alive and furious that anybody's bothering him. But yeah, in the book, it seemed like it took much more of a build-up and a lot more insulting on James Potter, Harry's dad in particular, before Harry really went off the deep end. But in the movie, he's just already seething and writhing and ready to fight. Then movie Marge, she just blows up, there's no wand or words involved, and then she floats away. Then Harry just up and runs away in the movie. A streetlight dies, a black dog appears, and Harry pulls out his wand, and then the night bus shows up. And they don't really do a fantastic job of explaining the night bus or where it came from or why. And inside the night bus, the movie uses a shrunken talking head that's dangling in the rearview mirror. And now that I have already started Goblet of Fire, things in Prisoner of Azkaban are getting kind of fuzzy, but I do not think that there was a shrunken head at all in the book. But in the movie, he's just kind of like throwing out sassy comments and getting in the mix of things where he's not exactly needed. And the beds are rolling all over the night bus in the movie, and visually, yeah, that's interesting, but as a functional service, that seems really stupid. Like, why would you even want rolling beds on a bus? It just seems like a lawsuit waiting to happen. Also, movie Harry first sees Sirius Black on the bus newspaper, whereas in the book, he's on the news. So they never actually mention it in the movie, but in the book, the Minister of Magic has had to tell the UK Prime Minister that, hey, this really crazy wizard has gotten loose. And from my understanding, the Prime Minister is the only person who actually knows about the wizarding world, like not even the Queen knows about it. So the general public, the non-magic using Muggle public, Like, they just think that Sirius Black is some escaped murderer. They don't know he's a wizard. So in the movie, they're just kind of like, oh, Sirius Black escaped, and they never fully cover that, hey, you know, he's out in the world wandering about. Why would Harry be in danger, but none of the other people that he's gonna cross? And in the movie, Harry does not tell the bus driver that his name is Neville Longbottom. Then Tom, inside of the leaky cauldron, is a hunchback, which the book does not describe him that way at all. And again, visually it's interesting, but I'm not sure if it's an interesting that I like necessarily. I don't know that that really adds any dimension or interest to the character. It just kind of makes him look like a poor suffering man. But maybe there's a reason for that, and he's supposed to appear in a later movie, and so being a hunchback will make him easier to visually recognize. I'm not sure. I'm thinking that when the third movie came out, like only the fourth or fifth book had been released at that point, but I'm not positive. Then movie Harry gets taken straight to the Minister of Magic in this weird office-like room, and the minister is already expecting him. In the book, Harry steps off the bus at the leaky cauldron, and the minister is like, oh, thank goodness, there you are. Oh, we've been so worried that, you know, somebody else was going to find you first kind of attitude. So I think that hurts the impression that you get of Cornelius Fudge in the movie, because it makes him seem very competent and put together as a politician. Because in the book, Fudge is sort of a bumbling, almost dolt level of a people pleaser. Like, you very much get the sense that he's an elected official and he's gonna bend over backwards to make everybody happy. Then in the movie, Harry opens up the monster manual inside of his room at the leaky cauldron when Hagrid had mailed it to him as a gift in his room at the Dursleys in the original book. Words and such are hard sometimes. Just ignore me. If you find this video of me reading notes annoying, just know I am normally scripted in my content, and so it usually flows out a lot better. Then Ron and Hermione show up in the movie at the leaky cauldron, and they already have Scabbers and Crookshanks. In the book, the kids met up and then went to Diagon Alley, and Hermione bought Crookshanks at a pet store there. I think it was called the Magical Menagerie. And Crookshanks had a whole backstory of being in this place for such a long time and nobody ever wanted him, and Hermione felt bad for him. And there was also a discussion by the lady that ran the Magical Menagerie in the book where some animals are magical, some are not, and that Scabbers was just a common garden rat that was probably getting to the end of his life, and that's why he was getting so sickly. Then movie Ron shows Harry a picture of their trip to Egypt that was in the paper, and there's no context given for why they went to Egypt or how. And in the book, Arthur Weasley had ended up winning some prize money, and that let the whole family go to Egypt and bought Ron a new wand. I'm really surprised that they didn't mention the prize money at all, because we know that the Weasleys are not a rich family. Even though they don't highlight it as much in the movie, it's still very prevalent by the way they dress, by the things they buy, that kind of thing. So for Ron to not get his wand replaced throughout the entire second movie and book, but to have a new wand in the third movie inexplicably, is just sort of a plot hole that they could have easily corrected. Then movie Arthur Weasley talks to Harry and tells him that Black escaped because Harry is all that's keeping Voldemort from returning, and there is no discussion of Sirius Black being Harry's godfather, which was something that Harry overheard, and then Arthur eventually came to tell him himself. Like, listen, I think you should know this because you boys are basically idiots that always get into trouble. So I think book Arthur is a good bit more fatherly, and movie Arthur is just sort of, you know, let's keep this clip moving along. What's next to check off the box? Which is so funny because when I first saw this movie, I could not stand it. I felt like it was way too long and dry and drawn out. And then after you read the book and you see the movie and all of these events are just like check, 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 skip, 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 check, check, check. And it's like, you're going too fast, slow down. So it's so strange how that perspective flips when you are reading these books and then rewatching these movies for the first time. Then there's the whole train scene where the Dementors come and sort of knock Harry out. but in the movie, he does not go to see Professor McGonagall or Madame Pomfrey. And I get why they might cut that out to save a good chunk of time in production, but that is also a pretty important scene because that's the first clue we get about Hermione getting the time turner. Then Dumbledore in the movie is warning all of the kids that Dementors don't distinguish between those they hunt and those who get in their way. And that's sort of a foreshadowing for what's going to happen at the end of the book, even though I still don't think that really covers it or makes any sense. But book Dumbledore actually makes a really specific reference that Dementors can see through pretty much any disguise, even invisibility cloaks. So that was Dumbledore's direct warning to Harry, don't just think you're going to throw on your dad's cloak and sneak right out to do whatever you want, because they'll see that and you're going to end up hurt. Then I wrote down that the fat lady in the movie, the painting of the fat lady, of course, I hope we all know that, she breaks a glass and won't let the kids inside of Gryffindor Tower. I don't think that there's anything directly in the book to reference that. I think that was just a weird personality moment that the movie added. But I do kind of hate when movies have to cut all this stuff from the book, but then they add in other things that don't really have value. I mean, it's not even a particularly funny moment, it's not a character building moment, and we've skipped already several important things, yet we have time to add in a scene with the fat lady. It's just kind of strange. And then the movie has a lot of cuts to the Whomping Willow outside of Hogwarts, and I guess it's out there killing birds now. I don't know if this tree has to eat, but those scenes with it certainly raise more questions than it answers. And the book does not really get in depth with the Whomping Willow at all. Like, it exists, it's referenced multiple times in multiple books, but as far as anything else, it's just kind of scenery. So again, it's almost a strange thing that the movie keeps calling attention to the Whomping Willow, and I know the willow becomes more important at the end of the story, but it's just another example of, did we really need this when we're skipping other things that are relevant to the plot? Then in the movie, Hermione just suddenly appears in divination and Ron's like, whoa, where did she come from? And there's absolutely no mention of Hermione's class loads. And Hermione is already really irritated in that class before there's any kind of reference to grades and abilities. In the book, Hermione started to get kind of an attitude about divination as soon as Professor Trelawney was like, well, it's an art that you can't study and be good at. You just have to naturally be good at it. And Hermione's like, what? No. And the divination class in the movie is out by this Stonehenge kind of thing, not up in the attic of Hogwarts like it is in the book. And then I just wrote a note, how are you in two classes at once? I'm pretty sure I was referencing, why is nobody asking Hermione in the movie how she's in two places at once? In the book, they at least try to ask Hermione and she gets really dodgy about it, like, don't worry about it, mind your own business, you know? But in the movie, it's like they never even try to ask her, and it's strange. Then the movie gets to the Care of Magical Creatures class, which is the one that Hagrid runs, and Buckbeak is the only hippogriff in that class. There's not 5 or 6 of them like there are in the book. And Movie Malfoy calls Buckbeak a great ugly brute and charges up to him, which gets him scratched. And they cut out all the stuff with Harry being the first to be kind of voluntold with the hippogriff and how he got to fly around with it, and that's what made Malfoy so jealous. Here in the movie, Malfoy's just like starting at a level 10 for no reason. But then again, Harry and his anger are kind of doing the same thing in this movie too. So I guess that's just the theme. Hormones suck. And the movie shows the Dementors kind of floating around in a few different scenes, and they show that nearby flowers just decay and wither, which is something the book does not discuss at all. Then movie Harry is allowed to face off with a Bogart, which in the book, Lupin stops that before he can, and the Bogart turns into a Dementor. So then Lupin jumps in, and it turns into a moon with clouds, which is a little bit different. In the book, the whole class was kind of going against the Bogart one-on-one, and then when it volleyed over to Lupin, it turned into what looked like a beach ball. So The reference to it being a moon was kind of there, but it wasn't something you would immediately pick up on and go, oh, I bet he's a werewolf. In the movie, I feel like they're a little bit too obvious with it. I mean, the guy's name is already Lupin, which means wolf. I mean, how much more on the nose can you get? Then movie McGonagall won't sign the permission slip because she's not a parent or guardian, when in the book, yeah, that was part of her defense. But she also said that, no, it's better for you to stay in the castle, Harry, because Sirius Black is out there and after you. And then while Harry is milling around the castle with everybody else at Hogsmeade, he runs into Professor Lupin and they start having a conversation about the Bogart and how Lupin was worried that it would turn into Lord Voldemort. And why they had that conversation in the first place makes no sense because Harry's already gone versus the Bogart in class. So Lupin didn't stop him. Why are they having this conversation? And then the movie adds in this really strange, awkward scene where Lupin is talking about how Lily was there for him when no one else was, and that she was so especially kind to him. So you get this whole impression that Lupin had a huge crush on Lily, but he doesn't mention a word about ever being friends with James Potter or any of the other kids. Movie Lupin actually makes it sound like the one and only friend he had was Lily. But in the book, Lupin never even mentions knowing Lily. He was James's friend. Then the fat lady goes missing, and in the movie, Filch sees her just around the corner hiding out. In the book, they had to have a big to-do search party to track her down. And then movie Snape asks very directly to his class, what is the difference between a werewolf and an animagus? And then movie Snape calls Hermione an insufferable know-it-all. And then Ron says, he's got a point, you know. No, that is not what happened. In the book, the entire class was furious that Snape was getting so mean and nasty to Hermione. Even Hermione was ready to cry at that point, and Ron did not chime in and defend Snape. I don't know what Rupert Grint did to upset the writers of Harry Potter, but book Ron is a whole different character from movie Ron. It's like movie Ron is just mean and petty and kind of dumb. Then we have the big Quidditch match, and in the movie, Cedric Diggory, I wrote down struck by lightning, but now my memory is fuzzy and I'm not sure of the context of that, and that a Gryffindor broom is on fire. I think what I'm trying to say is it was much more of a production than what the book made it feel like, which is one of the reasons that I don't like reading about the Quidditch matches in the book, because my brain kind of glazes over and we're talking about all of this fast action for a sports game that I cannot fully comprehend the look of. You know, if somebody were to describe a soccer match, I could visually see it and keep up and understand what's happening. But if somebody is writing out the match and they're like, oh, well, Stevens did a kick and a swish and a headbutt backflip, I really would not know how to mentally process what that meant. So I will say for Quidditch, I think the movies do it a lot more justice than the book. Then Harry sees a dog in the clouds, not even in the stands like he does in the book, just, you know, the metaphor of a dog in the clouds, and falls 100 feet down from where his broom is. And movie Dumbledore stands up and says some things and slows his body down so that it doesn't impact so hard. But in the book, his body really does crash straight down and he gets pretty seriously injured. And that didn't happen because he saw the dog in the stands. It happened because all the Dementors came flooding into the stadium where they weren't supposed to go. Then in the movie, the Marauders map only shows the names of things. And in the book, they describe that, oh, look, there's Mrs. Norris and she's stopping to take a drink. So I don't know how different the perception of what's supposed to be in the book versus the movie ended up being, but I at least saw it as you see the actual form of that person moving around and maybe not the name, which works better for what ends up happening. So I'm not really sure why the movie decided to just visually stamp the names on the map instead of the people. I wrote down Harry wandering around as floating sucker. I am not sure what that means now. This is what happens when you take the notes and take too long to actually sit down and film the video. Then in the movie, Ron and Hermione are a lot more flirty with each other, and they're really not in the book. This whole book, it just makes you feel really bad for Hermione because Ron is kind of in such hate with her. But in the movie, while the kids are in Hogsmeade, they are nowhere near the Shrieking Shack. It does not come up, and so we have no context for that when it does show up at the end of the movie. Then Movie Malfoy comes over to start his trouble for no reason, and he says the term mudblood, to which Harry is in his invisibility cloak, and he pelts Malfoy with snowballs, which is different in the book. Hermione's not even there, so Malfoy's just running his mouth to Ron, who's by himself, and Harry starts throwing, I think, clumps of mud at Malfoy and Crabbe and Goyle. So Harry comes off, I think, a lot less innocent in the book, whereas in the movie it's just snowballs, it's just kids being silly. You know, a snowball is not quite as aggressive or abrasive as flinging mud literally onto somebody. And then in the book, the kids are sitting in this restaurant and the minister and some others come in and they start expositing everywhere, and Harry's hiding under a table listening to it. But in the movie, Harry sees them going up into this secret area, so he throws on his cloak and follows them into this area that says no underage wizards allowed. And Rosmerta and Fudge are talking and they're explaining stuff about Sirius Black. And then McGonagall is the main talker here, which is not like it was in the book. It was really almost all Fudge talking. And McGonagall is the one that finally reveals Sirius Black is the godfather of Harry Potter. And Harry gets really upset and he storms out. Even though he's invisible, he's still not making any effort to be quiet. So how nobody put together that Harry was sneaking away at that point is beyond me. And even how he snuck away. I mean, even with the Marauders map, they don't show the old witch statue that he uses in the book. They don't show Snape getting suspicious and sort of, hovering around that area to figure out what's going on. It just doesn't make a ton of sense how Harry got to Hogsmeade in the movie. But then again, the movies have so much of a just go with it mentality that I'm not surprised. Then movie Harry starts practicing the Patronus with Lupin, and in 2 tries, he is able to make a Patronum shield, which is kind of like a wall, but I mean, in the book, Harry had to really work at his Patronus, and he struggled and just got these little silver wisps that came out, and he wasn't good at it. So for him to just be, oh yes, I mastered this almost impossible thing to do for even experienced wizards in just 2 tries, I feel like that is way overselling Harry's abilities. In the book, they really make it clear that Harry is a regular wizard kid who got lucky and survived. But in the movie, they keep constantly trying to reinforce this idea that Harry is super powerful, that he is godlike, and it just doesn't work as well for me. Then Scabbers is suddenly missing in the movie, and Ron and Hermione are fighting, when in the book, Ron had found missing Scabbers, blood, and orange hair everywhere, so there was a reason to suspect Crookshanks. And movie Hagrid went to Buckbeak's hearing at the Ministry with absolutely no help from the kids, when in the book, Hermione really did a lot of research and got Hagrid case studies and really tried to help him win that case. Then movie Harry is wandering around with the Marauders map, and he sees Peter Pettigrew's name on the map just really at random, and he sees the thing coming past him, and then it goes and nothing's there, and he's frustrated. But in the movie, I don't think Harry ever noticed the name Peter Pettigrew on the map. I believe the only person who ever caught it was Lupin, who left the map open and then ran away to go figure out where Peter was. Although that is kind of a flimsy plot device, because who is just going to be like, okay, I have this open map that shows me exactly where the thing I want is. Let me leave it on my desk and just go run in that direction and hope it doesn't move. And then right after Peter Pettigrew runs by Harry and he sees nothing, Snape appears, catches Harry, has him turn out his pockets right there in the hallway at night, which in the book, he had caught Harry by the statue that led to the tunnel to Hogsmeade, and then he drug Harry to his office and said, let's turn out your pockets and see where you've been. It really doesn't make any sense the way they did that in the movie. And then, instead of Snape calling Lupin in to give his feedback on the Marauders map like he does in the book, movie Lupin just wanders by in the dark to casually save the day, and Harry just brings up that he saw Peter Pettigrew on the map, which sort of sends Lupin off a bit. Then movie Trelawney, which also does not make any sense, she just openly insults Hermione when Hermione is really trying. Like, Hermione is not successful at what what she's doing, and Trelawney just like digs into her about not being talented. And that's where Hermione gets up and she puffs up and she leaves the class, but there was never any prediction of anybody leaving the class. And there was nothing with Parvati and Lavender being like fangirls for Trelawney. So again, it's weird that they're adding in some things and then cutting out other things that actually do add to the characters. Because in the book, right at the start of class, Trelawney was like, one of you will no longer be with us by Easter. And Parvati and Lavender Brown were really hanging onto her every word, and they believed in Trelawney. And so when Hermione huffs up and leaves in the book because she just feels like this class is horrible and the teacher is horrible, Lavender and Parvati are like, oh my gosh, it's just like you predicted, Professor. And then instead of having regular finals like in the book, Harry just finds this random orb in the hallway, takes it to Trelawney. He says he sees Sirius Black in it, and then Trelawney goes into her trance where she's like, tonight at midnight, the servant will return to the master. And there's no argument that Trelawney didn't say that or that Harry doesn't know what he's really seeing in the ball. And it's such a weird, flat kind of scene, which is horrible because the actress that does Trelawney is fantastic, but they just hacked and slashed at this character that she's nowhere near as interesting as she should be. And the movie also has no restrictions on the kids traveling around. Harry's not using a cloak to sneak around because he's not supposed to be out. And movie Hermione ends up punching Malfoy because they catch him getting a view for the execution. In the book, she does punch Malfoy, but it was just sort of like, I'm fed up with you for being rude to Hagrid. It wasn't, oh, let's see this Buckbeak guy get killed. But I will say, as far as movie flow, that works just fine, so I won't complain about it too much. Then in the movie, Hagrid does not get any appeal for Buckbeak like he does in the book, which is strange because they're still coming to him for the execution, which in the book was supposed to be an appeal where they brought the executioner with them, so it really wasn't much of an appeal. And then Hagrid just has Scabbers on hand in the movie. Hermione doesn't find him hiding out. Hagrid's just like, here, I found your rat, Ron. But why wasn't Scabbers biting Hagrid and trying to get away and, slipping into the Forbidden Forest and stuff like that? It doesn't make sense why it would happen in the movie that way. And also something else that the movie really leaves out is the big tiff that went on between Ron and Hermione for most of the book. And Harry wasn't really in the middle of that, but he was on Ron's side and not talking to Hermione because of an incident with the firebolt broom he'd been given at Christmas that Hermione got taken away because she thought it might be something bad that Sirius Black enchanted. But they totally skip over any hint of the kids being upset with each other in the movie. And then in the movie, they have somebody throw a stone at Hagrid's window so that they can see when the Ministry people are coming. And then when a second rock is thrown, movie Hermione thinks she saw, oh, never mind. But in the book, it was Harry who felt really weird when he stepped outside and his future self was nearby, but they never actually see any hint of each other. And then the movie has Hermione hugging all over Ron, which just felt weird and awkward. I think in the book, once they all broke down and kind of apologized to each other, Hermione was just, oh, I'm sorry. And Ron's like, okay, please let me go. But it just felt like in this movie, Hermione was all over Ron all the time. And then the movie, of course, they have to movie it up a bit, make it more action-y than the book. But Harry and Hermione are trying to get into the Whomping Willow hole, which is a tunnel that leads into the Shrieking Shack. And so they're just like dodging limbs like crazy and jumping into the hole. And there's no knot where you press the notch with a stick and the willow kind of turns itself off like there is in the book. Then movie Black and Lupin, they act like they're best buds and they act really evil, which is a big contrast to how it was in the book. Because Lupin comes in the book and he's just like, where is he, Sirius? Where is he? But in the movie, they're kind of like already best pals. Like, I miss ya, love ya, sweetheart. And movie Lupin is already fully in the loop with everything about Sirius Black and Peter Pettigrew and all of it. And he explains nothing to the rest of us. So this is where the movie completely drops the ball and then kicks it down the gutter. We get no information that Lupin, Sirius Black, James Potter, and Peter Pettigrew are the ones who made the Marauders map, let alone that Sirius, Pettigrew, and Potter were all animagus. I never know how to say that right. Or that the Shrieking Shack, the Tunnel, and the Whomping Willow were all part of Dumbledore's solution to let Lupin, who was infected by a werewolf virus, go to Hogwarts. So there's this giant gap of information that is really relevant to what's going on. And even if it's not immediately part of the plot, it's still pretty important information to have. Then movie Snape busts into the room and he's only interested in Sirius Black, whereas in the book he's kind of like, everybody's in trouble now, and Lupin, I knew what you were, and I'm gonna tell everybody, meh. But movie Snape is only like, I see you, Black, what a worthy competitor kind of attitude. Then in the movie, only Harry goes after Snape, and there's no big fight where they knock Snape out. Then Peter gets turned back into a human, and in the movie he does not defend himself at all, and Scabbers was never sick in the movie, which seems like another small detail they could have done visually and not even mention, but they didn't, and it's weird. Oh, and movie Ron has his leg bit, but it's not broken like it was in the book. So Ron is far less useless in the movie, even though he's written in the movie to be much, much worse and a lot more incompetent. And in the book, Peter was chained to both Lupin and Ron, but then in the movie, they had only Lupin with Pettigrew, and he was just watching him. They weren't even, handcuffed or tethered or anything. And the movie never mentions the potion that Snape was making and giving to Lupin so that when he turned into a werewolf, he kept his human mind. They don't say anything about that until Lupin is turning into a werewolf. And when everybody leaves the Shrieking Shack and goes through the tunnel, Snape isn't brought along, but he shows up and actually defends the kids. Which in the book, Snape is totally knocked out and they just have him sort of floating along behind them. And in the movie, Harry's fighting the werewolf and then a female calls it away, which does not happen at all in the book. Then Black turns into a dog, he starts fighting with werewolf Lupin, and he looks like he's dead at that point. And that's when the Dementors arrive. There is no Hermione at this point. In the book, I believe Black went to chase Lupin down, and then the Dementors got him by the river, or lake, whatever it was, pond. And Hermione was really instrumental in a lot of what was going on there. And Harry makes a Patronum shield, but there's just way too many Dementors in the movie. And then a Dementor comes over, but the Dementor's kiss is never mentioned, and Black looks like he's dead, Harry looks like he's gonna die. Oh, and then I realized at this point that the movie completely omitted the Ravenclaw Quidditch match. They did nothing with the Quidditch Cup. They did pretty much nothing with the Firebolt until the very, very, very last few seconds. And then they changed some details in the movie that really were unnecessary to change. Like in the book, after they did the stuff with the time turner, it was 8:50. In the movie, it was 7:30. I don't see what the benefit is of changing that detail. And I don't get why nobody uses the invisibility cloak. I mean, it would be perfect for when they're using the time turner, wouldn't it? Oh, and then the movie had to put in this line where Hermione is so distraught about what her hair looks like from the back. That is not book Hermione at all. She has not got any hint of vanity about her. And then they're trying to get Buckbeak to follow them, but he will only come when they have ferrets in the movie. In the book, they had to finagle him and it took some time, but I don't believe they bribed him with ferrets. And since the Weeping Willow does not have that notch to deactivate it in the movie, Lupin uses Immobilis on the Willow instead. And then movie Harry jumps straight to, that was my dad that saved us all, with no explanation as to why he thought that. In the book, Harry was like, listen, a lot of people who are supposed to be dead are showing back up today, so why couldn't my dad be one of those people too? And then the movie shows everybody exiting the Whomping Willow hole at the base of it, but who immobilized it when they came back out? Since there's no, notch button there, who immobilized it for them? I mean, it was active before, right? Or was Lupin's charm still working from probably hours before? Just doesn't make much sense. And in the movie, Crookshanks adds pretty much zero value to the plot other than, hey, Hermione has a cat now. In the book, Sirius and Crookshanks were working together for a while, and I kind of thought, oh man, Crookshanks might have been his old pet. Unfortunately, he wasn't, but I think that was an interesting thought that could have been explored. And so the reason that Crookshanks was fixated on Scabbers in particular was because Sirius Black had already clued in Crookshanks as to what was going on. So the cat was trying to help the convict wizard, basically. But in the book, the cat's just kind of there for no benefit or value. And the movie also cuts out Sir Cadogan, who replaces the fat lady as the Gryffindor, what do you call that, security guard painting, I guess? And he was a fun little guy. I missed him. But Buckbeak in the movie ends up fighting off the werewolf, which does not happen in the book. And it's Hermione who says, I'm saving our lives, and she's doing it with the werewolf howl instead of I can't even remember what they did in the book, but I believe it was Harry that did something. Oh, yeah, I think that line, I'm saving our lives, is when Harry popped up on the other side of the pond and did the Patronus at the Dementors. And that's what saved his past self in Sirius Black. And really, the movie gives us no real understanding on the Patronus. They don't really do the animal form thing at all in this movie. And it's just this big white light shield. Then the movie puts Black in a cell with bars when in the book he was just up in, I believe it was Flitwick's office waiting for the Dementors to come to collect him. And movie Harry wants to go with Black, but Black says no. And then Black gives Harry a pep talk that actually Dumbledore had given Harry in the book. And then movie Harry and Hermione return to the hospital at midnight. They were never locked in. There was nothing going on with Snape having a meltdown that I think these kids did something to let Black go. And that is kind of strange after you read it to not see that in the book, because Snape is so, I'm gonna hold this grudge and get everybody in trouble. He's Candace from Phineas and Ferb, basically. So for Snape to let this all go so easily in the movie, it does feel weird. Then at the very end of the movie, the firebolt broom gets delivered to Harry with a feather, and that's kind of Black's sign that they got it out and made it okay. In the book, Harry got the broom at Christmas as a weird present from Sirius Black, but he didn't know who it was from, so the broom got taken away, and it was a whole to-do, and drug in Hermione into the middle of it. And then the movie ends with no mention of the house cup, which I think is the second time in a row they've done that now. And they don't say anything about Hermione giving the time turner back, or even that she had it legally in the first place, that McGonagall had to write the ministry and vouch for her. And I don't know, they're little missing details, true, but they're still details that I feel like add a lot to the story and the characters in different ways. So yeah, the things that the movie adds versus what they change or subtract is really bizarre, and a lot of it makes no sense, and I think I know why I always hated that movie now. Anyways, I have gone on for long enough and my hands hurt from holding that heavy journal open. So I'm gonna let you go. I know I've been rambling on like a crazy person long enough, but thank you so much if you've made it this far. Drop me an extra comment in the section below for comments. And again, if you like talking about the Harry Potter books, go to the Fanily channel, or you can look up the There I Read It podcast and go over everything chapter by chapter with me. Anyways, guys, I'm really gonna go this time. See you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye! Well, Fanily members, we're almost done, but I want to invite you to hang out with me in some other places. I'm on Twitter and Instagram as my own personal self, and I have a Facebook page too, but I mostly just post photos over there. And sometimes people say, hey McGann, I want to mail you something. How do I do that? Easy. Just click the About tab on my channel page, and my most current P.O. Box info will be right there. I also run another channel, The Fanily. It's really a hodgepodge channel where we might post anything. Oh yeah, and I also sell shirts and stickers and stuff with the Fanily and the Fangirl logos. If that is your cup of tea, I have a link in every description of every video. Finally, if you want to help out the Fangirl channel and make sure I'm putting out video essays for years to come, the best way you can help is by subscribing and watching more of my videos, whether they're new, old, whatever. Maybe even share one or two on social media, help spread the word. People who watch to the end of videos like you helps to tell the site, hey, this is a good video, we should recommend it to other people. So if you made it this far, leave me a comment of something like, hey, I made it to the end. Love ya. See you next time, Fanily members. Bye.